I just played a game where everything from the code to the artwork, even the music and sound effects, was generated using AI. That's the pitch behind CODEX MORTIS, and it's also why there's already a lot of discussion around it. Some players are curious what that actually looks like in a finished product. Others don't really care how it was made as long as the game is fun. And then there are players who are completely against AI-generated content in games. That divide is already showing. Even the demo released back in December is sitting at mixed reviews. Putting something like this out comes with risks. Not everyone is going to be on board with it. On top of that, it's launching in early access with a confident pitch. The developers say it already has dozens of hours of content and that AI lets them update the game quickly based on feedback. So the question becomes simple. Does this actually hold together as a game right now? I spent a good amount of time with it and I'll walk you through how it plays, where it works, and where it struggles. At its core, this is a top-down survivors game with roguelite elements. You go into runs, fight through waves of enemies, complete objectives, and build your character as you progress. The wave clearing part is what you'd expect to be the focus. In practice though, a lot of the game has you doing something else entirely. When you start the game, you're placed in a hub where you prepare everything before going into a run. This is where you pick spells, equip artifacts, and build your loadout around synergies. The game shows you which combinations activate, so it removes a lot of the guesswork early on. The issue is that once you find a strong setup, there isn't much reason to change it. I ended up sticking with one combination for most of my runs because it was very effective. I'll come back to this later. There's also a full upgrade section here. You spend souls to increase your base stats, unlock more spell slots, and gain access to new spells. Souls come from your runs, mainly through killing enemies and completing objectives. You can unlock new heroes by defeating a specific enemy called the Ash Warden, which randomly shows up during your runs. Once unlocked, heroes can be added to your party. Each one has their own spell and artifact slots, and they're more limited in what spells they can equip. Artifacts are unlocked similarly by defeating another enemy called the Relic Cryptmaster. These are passive items that scale as you level up during a run, giving you additional bonuses each time you level. There is a local co-op as well, although I didn't test it extensively. I was able to control a second player using the arrow keys, and that second player takes control of one of your unlocked heroes. They follow the same restrictions with limited slots and no duplicate spells. The camera will keep zooming out if players move apart, so you're not tethered together. Once you're in a run, the game moves fast. Enemies spawn quickly, effects start filling the screen, and you level up often. Each level gives you a choice of upgrades to your current spells, and these are classified into rarities. The rarer ones give stronger effects. There's also a reroll option, but it uses souls, and the cost increases each time you use it. It quickly becomes too expensive, so it's not something you will rely on early. Here's another issue. The spells themselves are limited in how they were designed. There's really only one proper projectile, which is the Bone Spear. Most of the other spells are aura-based, damage over time, or summons. So instead of having distinct ways to attack, your character and your party end up applying effects while staying close to enemies. Summons are also kind of useless in boss fights. If they collide with the boss, they get deleted almost instantly. For most of the game, I prioritized upgrades for the Bone Spear. Damage, cooldown reduction, and additional projectiles were enough to clear enemies quickly. That made the other spells feel less useful by comparison. Objectives vary per stage. The first stage has a time limit where you collect pages, while other stages have different mechanics, like bosses constantly chasing you while you try to complete objectives. This is where the game shifts away from the wave clearing focus. The option of staying in one place and building your character through fights gets taken away. A lot of these stages have you constantly moving and prioritizing objectives over leveling up your character. There are also side interactions during runs, but this is where things get confusing. Some stages have treasure chests or altars. You stand still to open them while enemies are active and you get a random reward through a roulette. That can be experience, healing, souls, runic shards, or sometimes even nothing. However, these rewards don't feel that impactful, and this system isn't even in later stages due to different mechanics. All stages also have rituals spawning randomly across the map. You stay inside a marked magic circle and defeat enemies, and this rewards you with runic shards. Runic shards increase your stats during a run. You can see the numbers go up if you open up your stats, but the game doesn't clearly explain what they are or how they work. You can get a lot of these through rituals, and since they give noticeable stat increases, they're always worth doing if you want to get stronger faster. Multiple systems are giving you upgrades, but the game doesn't make it easy to understand what you're gaining or how your build is improving. The UI also becomes difficult to read once the action picks up. During boss fights especially, there are a lot of elements appearing on screen at the same time. Effects, notifications, indicators, and enemy visuals overlap, and it becomes hard to track what's happening. Boss attacks are usually shown with area indicators, but the timing isn't always clear. Some of them don't show when the hit will land, so sometimes you end up guessing when to move. Movement in the game is simple. There's no dash and attacks are automatic with no manual aiming. That works against regular enemies, but during boss fights, it forces you to move closer than you'd want. A lot of bosses can kill you in one hit if you collide with them, which becomes another issue. Visually, the game has a retro style, but it feels flat. There isn't much depth in the environments, and in some stages, it's very hard to tell what's actually part of the level. Walls and floors can blend together, which adds to the clarity issues during gameplay. The music follows a similar pattern. It fits the dark tone of the game, but it stays in the background and doesn't leave much of an impression. It works for what the game is doing, but it doesn't add much to the overall identity of the game. Progression is where things start to stretch. Later stages expect you to be stronger, which means investing heavily into your base upgrades. The most efficient way to do that is farming souls in earlier stages. The first stage is where this works best. It has a time limit for the main objective, but after that, you can keep on going as enemies continues to spawn. This makes it easy to stay in a run and farm large amounts of souls before leaving. Other stages don't really allow this because of their mechanics, like bosses constantly chasing you. The loop ends up being repeating earlier stages to build up enough power for later ones. With that said, there are some good ideas here. Each stage introduces different mechanics instead of repeating the same structure. The build system starts to feel interesting once synergies stack properly. There are moments where everything comes together and the game feels engaging. But those moments are not consistent, and a lot of that comes back to clarity and structure. As for the AI side, it's part of the conversation, but it doesn't carry the experience on its own. The developers talk about using AI to speed up development, but also about stepping in to rebuild parts of the game when things don't scale properly. That shows here. There's a lot of content and systems, but they don't always connect in a clear way. Right now, CODEX MORTIS feels like a game with a lot of ideas already in place, but still trying to organize them into something more cohesive. There is a foundation here. The variety in stages, the build system, and some of the moment-to-moment scenarios show that there's something worth building on. But the lack of clarity, the reliance on farming on stage 1, and how loosely some systems are explained make it harder to stay engaged over time. If you're curious about how AI-driven development translates into an actual game, or you enjoy experimenting with builds and pushing through progression systems, there's something to check out here. However, I cannot recommend this game in its current state. I think dialing down the reliance on AI a bit and taking a more hands-on approach to the game design would help. The core ideas are there, but they need more structure, better user experience, and a clearer direction for how the game is meant to be played. It's still in early access, and the developers are planning to expand it with more content and systems. Whether that improves the experience will depend on how well they address the clarity issues and how the progression loop evolves. If you'd like to check the game out, the link is in the description. And if you like the video, consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and sticking around for more. I'll see you in the next one.